Hello everybody. For the past couple of weeks I haven't had any opinion on the Thursday updates for Space Engineers because they've been really anemic. They really haven't had anything worth commenting on. Instead I've focused on understanding ship design better, and I'm going to go ahead and show you a ship design and then we're going to blow it up. It should be fun. So, in the past I've talked a lot about heavy armor techniques, like the wheel technique and that sort of thing, and those work really great. But heavy armor is of course heavy and expensive. Light armor is generally more efficient and effective, but most people don't tell you how to design light armor, so I'm going to go ahead and teach you the tricks, the 4 basic tricks to designing good light armor, and then we're going to shoot at this ship a bunch, and I'll show you how well it works. This is the Superglue. It is a light frigate that is intended to be as cheap as possible. It can be 3D printed, it's affordable, it can actually be made in survival mode with relative ease. It does use a few mods. It uses 2 engine mods and my power mod. So there's the industrial thrusters, and inside we have some Sec10 modular thrusters and my power. But it doesn't have any other mods in it, so there's no heavy weapons or anything like that. But as you can see, it's quite small. It has all the features you'll need, but it is really a 1 or 2 person craft. So what are the 4 techniques that you'll want to use when designing light armor? The first is, I guess you can call them crenellations. I'm sure that there are other terms for them, but they're these things like this, which stick out from the ship. Crenellations are great because they'll catch the incoming fire. They're not generally very useful if you are a sitting duck, but in a combat situation where everyone is moving, it's far more likely that the enemy is going to hit a slab of armory stuff sticking out rather than manage to pinpoint accurate fire through it. When you're creating crenellations, there are a couple of basic things that you're going to want to think about. One is, are you using light armor or are you using an object? So up here in the front you can see I'm using objects. In this case I'm using grates. That's because they're see-through. But back here I'm using light armor. Now light armor is generally better because it deforms. So if you get hit by a missile, you're not going to just lose all of the other blocks. You're going to have them deform into an unusual shape, but the next missile is likely to hit those deformed blocks rather than just going through. This is a 2 wide crenellation. Now it's important to have these as 2 wide when possible, because if it's 1 wide then the ends will snap off and float away. So 2 wide is generally better. And up here you can see that this primary shield on the sides is 2 wide. And that means that if missile hits here, it might actually survive with this vertical intact, and then these 2 will survive, and it'll remain largely able to protect the rest of the ship. But in general, these object armors are a lot less efficient and effective than the ones that can distort. Light armor would be a better solution there, but it wouldn't be see-through. You can see I've got more up here in the front. This one is in fact 3 wide, but over here these are only 1 wide. Now the reason for that is because of the way that missiles are going to hit them. They're going to hit these yellow target areas, and there's really no chance of anything beyond the yellow area snapping off because there's nothing beyond the yellow area. So there's no reason to make this one too wide. It's only intended to take 1 missile hit, maybe 2 missile hits if you're real lucky. When you're creating a missile firing zone, you have to be careful because your maximum rotation may end up having your missiles impact on your armor. So that's why there are no strong crenellations down here. It's just a scoop shape. That's because the armor will get hit by your missiles and you'll end up blowing yourself up. Not great. So aside from crenellations, we also have ribbing. Ribbing is when you use blast doors or some other similar material to create projections out from the armor with the intent of catching the missile further away from the armor on a more durable object. So these light armor blocks underneath this are very fragile, but these blast door blocks are actually quite durable. So when a missile hits the blast door blocks, it'll detonate, it'll damage the blast door blocks, and in theory the armor beneath will survive. It's not quite that effective. It's not like you're not going to take any armor damage, but you will reduce it substantially. However, this is a bad example because this is not how you should do it. The only reason I'm doing it like this is because of the way that the front happens to be shaped. I'll show you a more efficient way to use these blast door ribbings. Now down here we have one of our primary engines, and it's only got a single layer of light armor. But it's still very durable because these blast door ribbings really do catch the missiles that come in and deflect them, to make sure that they explode far enough away from the engine that no engine damage is taken, and they also largely protect the light armor underneath. Now, you might be wondering, do you really need to have them that tightly wound? A lot of people like to use blast doors every other, like I did up front, rather than every single block. Well, yes, this is a lot more effective. I would say it's almost 2 times as effective. The big reason for that is because if there's gaps in it, then yes, the missiles are likely to impact on the ribbing rather than on the armor surface, but they're likely to impact on an interior plane, and that means that the explosive damage is going to spread a lot further along your light armor base, and is even possibly going to go through and hit your engine. So a tight ribbing is a lot more effective than a loose ribbing. It's better to have tight spot ribbing like this than to have loose ribbing that wraps around the entire ship. So the third method to use is air gaps. Air gaps are incredibly powerful because even with light armor, you're not going to have the light armor get swept away by a missile hit. You're going to have a hole in the light armor, but the chances of someone being able to fire through that hole again in a combat situation are quite low. So these air gaps provide a huge amount of protection, and that means that this area is extremely durable, even though it's just one layer of light armor. Now this air gap serves double duty. It's also a vent gap, so that this engine has a place to fire its thrusters. You can also create air gaps manually without needing, without any excuses. Either way works, but they do make your ship bulky, so you're going to want to be careful of that. Now I've actually put a lot of air gaps into this ship, and we're going to talk about that in more detail later. But one thing we're not doing is we're not talking about flying armor. Flying armor is similar to air gaps, except for instead of being inside the ship, they are like projections outside the ship that are tethered to the ship. And you'll see that a lot in large designs because there's a space for it. Flying armor is very, very good, and especially for heavy armor structures. But flying armor takes up a lot of space and is a little bit heavier than these techniques, so there was no room for it in my design here. Not unless you count these as flying armor. They're not really, they're just screens. The fourth and final technique is using components as armor. So here, and this is something I'm surprised so many people overlook, it should be basic. Here is an industrial engine. I've got 2 reverse industrial engines, one on the top of the ship and one on the bottom of the ship. And my assumption is that you're going to lose one of these engines in fight. I don't plan on you being able to keep both of them because neither of them are particularly well protected. This one only has 1 layer of light armor on top of it. But even after these engines are damaged beyond operability, they remain a huge armor piece. They take missile fire very, very well. You can fire missiles at these things all day, and they'll just sit there and take it, even if they are no longer working. And that means that this is really excellent armor to protect the reactor room. This reactor room is surprisingly well protected. It's got an engine above it, and below it, it's got an air gap the size of Missouri. On the sides, it has a double air gap. Let's see if I can show you that. Air gap, and then some armor. So it is a really, really well protected situation, and it's very rare for this ship to take any damage to its reactor core. So the 4 techniques I used to build this light armor ship are crenellations, ribbing, air gaps, and components as armor. In this case, these are also armor components. A lot of people have taken to doing that, like ribbing their ship with antenna. I didn't go that far, but it's the same basic idea. So let's blow the ship up a whole bunch and see how it fares. Now I think that I have, yep, there's some ships over there. So let's go back into first person mode. There we go. Now the firing arc on these is like this. And you are welcome to use that firing arc, but it's not actually as effective as it could be, because the missiles are very tightly packed, which means that they tend to all explode at once, most of them will explode far away from their target. The first one hits, and then the rest of them ripple explode. Not great. So what I've gone and done is created a very basic delay system, which delays the missile fire. And by delaying it like that, you get a slightly better damage profile. It's not a huge improvement, but it is enough to be noticeable. So let's go ahead and bombard these ships a whole bunch and see what happens. We're going to go ahead and just gut this ship with a basic front-side barrage like we were in combat with it. And then over here, we're going to do a broadside barrage like it was trying to get away from us. Let's take a look. Forgot where I was. Where's the second ship? Oh, okay, there it is. So let's take a look at the damage. This is our front side barrage here. Pardon the slow motion. My mouse wheel is a little bit finicky and I don't want to make everyone sick. So you can see that the front side is in fact relatively vulnerable. The flying armor provides, the crenellations provide some protection, but not as much as you might hope for. The seat is still intact. Now, if you were going to go into combat, I would recommend that you start off using this seat until you run out of cameras, because this seat is basically invincible. But with that said, even with that sustained fire against the front end, all we did is lose pressure. We didn't actually lose command. So that's pretty decent. And the rest of the damage, that did ripping apart some of this armor on the side, is largely inconsequential. I don't think this ship did anything other than lose one turret and one antenna, which is rather insignificant damage. Now this was a sustained broad attack, the side attack. Let's take a look and see how this fared. You can see that it didn't even hit the front end. I didn't get close enough to even use those crenellations, but instead we just tore along the side here. So this damage is exactly the same as on the other ship, but over here we've got a heavy hit against the side of the ship. However, the air gaps we introduced worked perfectly, and we didn't suffer any damage at all to any ship systems. Just none of them. We didn't lose a single thing except, like, one of our turrets and its supply line broke. Ooh. Now this engine here is still fully functional. Obviously you can tear through the engine at this angle. The ribbing won't protect you there, but that was a pretty sustained barrage, and the engine didn't take any damage. You can see that the crenellations on the back did their job, caught some of the missile fire. So let's go ahead and clear these two away, and let's do a little bit more damage. Some floating debris, that's fine. Come on, copy? I can't do this without a reticule. It's actually really hard. Come on. There we are. Okay. Can't be in the captain's seat, that's the problem. Alright, so we got two more. Let's go ahead and bombard them substantially more aggressively. Well, let's go ahead and attack from a slightly different set of angles. This is the sort of damage pattern you might see. Oh, I don't know what that was about. This is the sort of damage pattern you might see if you were in combat with this guy, like, you know, in a multiplayer environment, trying to fire at him. Now let's go ahead and attack this one from below. I don't think we did any damage. I think that sustained attack did nothing. Well, we'll go ahead and do even more damage to it in a bit. So, obviously firing directly into the weapons bay is going to cause damage, so that's why there's ribbing on the bottom, on the chin. Alright, let's take a look and see how well we did. Now remember, we're looking for these ships to have survived that backlash. So from above, we have, well, obviously all of our antennas have been damaged, but that's kind of the point. We did lose pressure in here, but we didn't lose the captain's seat. It's not even damaged. I don't see any damage to the interior at all, so it looks like this thing didn't really take any damage at all from that missile barrage, aside from peeling off 2 Gatling turrets and a missile turret. Yep, everything is still fully intact, so let's pop over here and see how it happens from below. So we did some sustained fire from below, and it looks like we did lose a couple of our missiles, but I don't think... Okay, we did lose one of our engines as well, but that's to be expected. The air gap served us perfectly, and these interior spaces aren't even damaged. So if you're wondering, how durable can a light armor ship be? Do I need to use heavy armor? We didn't even lose air pressure. So you don't have to use heavy armor all the time. You can go ahead and rely pretty heavily on light armor. That said, let's go ahead and do some more damage. Oh. So that's the sort of sustained barrage you will hopefully never encounter. Now, where the heck is our other ship? Oh, down there. Okay. For some reason, the sound stopped working. Not sure what's up with that, but whatever. This is the other ship, right? I'm not just bombarding the same one twice, am I? Oops! I just hit a floating piece of debris 3 inches from my ship. I sincerely hope that that is not going to cause any issues for me. So, if you have ever been in combat in Space Engineers, you know that this kind of bombardment is not uncommon. But you would normally be moving, so it would be difficult for me to hit you quite as aggressively as this. And now let's go ahead and see how that works. So we definitely tore this ship up, but we didn't lose the command chair. The side damage is becoming rather severe, but our air gap is still fully functional. And you can see how I've mounted these gyroscopes on an inside wall, meaning that they won't float away, even if there is damage to the outside. It looks like our reactors are still intact. We lost some of our engines. We still have 2 of them. Oh, I see. We drilled down from above. This ship is still basically fully functioning. It's lost about 50% of its forward thrust, and I think it's lost some of its missile launchers, but it's still battle-worthy. Now you can see what I was talking about. These will actually outlast, these ribbings will actually outlast the underlying armor, and you can see that showing right about now a little bit. Maybe this one was the one we didn't hit very hard. Let's take a look at the other one. Well, this one, again, we didn't even blow up the captain's chair. We did manage to break through into the engineering area, but I don't think we damaged any of the engineering components. We lost 1 of our 4 primary engines, and I think we lost 1 of our reverse engines. But once again, this air gap did its job wonderfully. We still have full function on all of our assemblers and oxygen and such, which means that we could, in fact, just go somewhere and repair this. This ship is way too durable. Anyhow, the ship has been released. I'll post a link to it, and you can go ahead and play with it. And give me your opinion. If you have more armor techniques that you'd like to share with me, let me know. And, if this has been of any help to you, let me know. If you design a ship with these in mind, I'd love to see some screenshots or play around with it.